These are Thoughts from My Car, Episode 3. Today I want to talk about Lightwave photography and whether or not it can mean dark days ahead for working photographers, the weekend warrior, the pros and the con men, and coming out in praise of criticism. I'm Rod from SGNR Photo. I want to thank you once again for tuning into this ongoing podcast experiment, the only known photography podcast that openly admits to being recorded inside a moving car and doesn't just sound that way. It's a Wednesday morning at 7 a.m. It's raining out, and I want to start off by going over an article that came across my news feed this past weekend. And it's from a company called Lightwave, who are trying to revolutionize the way we take photos. Now, Lightwave is not exactly a new company. They've been around for a few years. I would say 2 to 3 years ago, they came out with their original Lightwave camera, about the size of a large salt shaker. And what it produces, essentially, are images that you can manipulate after the fact. And what I don't mean is by manipulate after the fact, change the color or cropping or whatever, because you can do that with pretty much anything these days. But what it is it's a sensor system, a lens design, and a software bundle that's all put together so that way you can take photos and do interesting things with them, like manipulate the focus or the focal point of the image after the image has been taken. Now, so far, this has been a web-only technology, because the images that these little salt shaker cameras produce are very small, they're square, and I think they run inside their own web applet. I really don't know a whole lot about it, because for myself, in terms of practical use, I don't have a practical use for a camera like this. It's not useful for a working photographer to only be able to display images on a website in a square crop format. So I didn't really pay much attention to it until I came across this more recent article. What Lightwave's trying to do right now is they're trying to take their little salt shaker camera, which, doesn't offer much in terms of ergonomics, functions, or features, and they're gussying it up for the consumer market en masse. And what their goal is to be is, if film cameras were camera 1.0, and the recent crop of digital SLRs are camera version 2.0, they are looking to turn this new Lightwave handheld camera into photography 3.0. They want to become the standard by which photography is measured, or how photography is taken, made, or however you want to put it. They want to be what you think of when you think of the word camera. And I have a problem with this. Not with the device itself. What bothers me is the philosophy behind how they're pushing this camera and how they're going to market this camera. The part of the philosophy that bothers me is that the CEO of Lightwave, Jason Rosenthal, has come out in an interview to say that photography is now going to become a 100% digital media and no longer needs to adhere to what used to, we no longer have to worry about what we used to do in terms of photography. Because more people are viewing images on their phones and their iPads. So we should just ditch the traditional format or form factor or process or everything about what photography has been for the past 175 years and move into a completely new paradigm. I don't know if he used that, but I like to gussy it up that way. I've been told I need to make this podcast a little more highbrow. So while we're making this paradigm shift without a clutch, I think it's very important to note that basing a photography system on the fact that more people are viewing photos on their phones and tablets, and that online photo sharing has gone up exponentially in the past 5 years, is a very, very short-sighted idea. Because it doesn't take very long to go back through the memory of the past 5 years and think about exactly what kind of photos are we sharing online. Seriously, Go through most people's Instagram feeds, go through their Facebook feeds, and what are you seeing? You're seeing one of three types of photos for the most part. You're going to see a photo of what they've eaten for dinner, usually with some kind of annoying vintage style filter. You're going to see a badly composed, usually out of focus or completely blurred selfie taken in a dirty bathroom mirror. Or you're going to see just a regular snapshot of where someone is at this moment. Those are the types of photos that you're coming across. You're not coming across photos of people going out on, their backpacking trips through Europe and taking these vast panoramas of the scenery in front of them. Or visiting some ancient cathedral in, the middle of Europe or somewhere in North America, in one of the older cities in North America. You're more likely to come across somebody eating a burger and fries. You're more likely to come across someone holding up a cell phone with their eyes glowing like, they've been possessed. We're not talking about spectacular photos. This is not what I want to base the new paradigm off of. This is not what we should be saying is the reason why we're moving forward with photography. And the second part of it that bothers me is a quote that I came across in the article about this camera. And I'm going to read that quote to you. The thing is that we can take aspects of imaging that you always had to get right at the time that you take the picture, like focus and perspective and depth of field, and we can move all that into after-the-fact adjustments after you take the picture. The way it works going forward is that you capture this rich data and then you make the picture look exactly how you want it after the fact with software. Now, I can see where some people would say, well, this is exactly like digital photography now, because people take photos with their digital camera and they bring them into Photoshop, and because a lot of people don't have any restraint or self-control, they overuse Photoshop actions and they manipulate the living shit out of their photos. But that's not what this is about. That's a very superficial look and a very superficial comparison. Let's go through the first part of that quote again. We can take aspects of imaging that you always had to get right at the time you take the picture, like focus and perspective and depth of field, and we can move all that into after-the-fact adjustments after you take the picture. So we're not talking about just a little crop here or there. We are talking about full-blown everything. We are talking about taking the entire craft of taking a really nice photo and just taking a piss all over it. Because whether you are conscious of it or not, no matter what imaging device you are using to take a picture, you always start out by making a series of choices before that photo is taken. The first thing that you are doing is you are deciding what your subject is, where you want to place it in the frame, and how you want it to look. Composition and perspective. Your subject is typically going to be the focal point of your image, so you're already thinking about focus. Depth of field, well, sometimes you have to think about that a little bit more. Do you want it to be the only thing in focus in your image, with everything else blurred out in the background, to isolate it and just, feature that one particular thing or person? Or are you going to make everything in sharp tack focus? For example, landscape photography, where the entire vista that is in front of you is the subject of your photo, and you want everything to look crisp and beautiful. Now, granted, on some cameras, you don't have a whole lot of choice on some of these. You don't have a lot of control on them. You have to kind of do things in different ways. Your average point and shoot in your cell phone camera are not going to have the same level of control as you will with an SLR. But the point is that you are always making these decisions. Now, as we can see, when we're looking through the Instagram, Facebook, Flickr generation of photos of the past 5 to 6 years, people don't always make really good decisions with these. And that's fine. Not everybody's cut out to be a really good photographer. Or some people just don't have the patience to really learn. But what we're doing right now with this, and this philosophy, is we're taking the idea of developing the craft of taking aesthetically pleasing photos, and we're taking a big shit on it. By saying, you know what, maybe it's about time that we actually do create a camera that's responsible for taking the really nice picture. Any photographers out there, or people who know photographers, know exactly what I mean. You know, the all too familiar pet peeve of people coming up to you and saying, hey, you take great pictures, you must have a really nice camera. We're now taking that pet peeve and making it a reality. Because if you don't have to think about the focus and the perspective and the depth of field and anything else about the photo, well, guess what? The camera is doing everything. I don't care if you're clicking a mouse button here or there to change focal points after the fact. The fact of the matter is, you're not doing anything. You're not a photographer. You're a monkey pressing a button. And where I get offended with this is that you're going to get people who go out and buy these cameras and they're going to put up a couple of reasonably decent images. They're going to explain the trickery behind it. And then these people who have gone out and seen what this particular type of camera can do are actually going to meet up with someone who is genuinely able to take any camera and get a decent image out of it. And the assumption is going to be automatically that the camera did all the work. This devalues the craft of photography enormously, in my opinion. When you put the seed in someone's mind that it's not the photographer who creates the image, but all they're doing is pressing a button, that's bad for photography. I'm not even going to get into the art form aspect of photography because, let's face it, if you polled 1,000 people at random and asked them if they consider photography to be an art form, they'd probably go back and think of everyone's Flickr and Twitter and Instagram and Facebook feeds and go, yeah, probably not. You know, photography as an art is fairly dead. It's not dead, but it's on life support, and that bothers me a lot. I am very much hoping that this system does not become Camera 3.0. Because if it does, working photographers who have spent a lot of time developing their skills, who have spent a lot of time learning the intricate ins and outs of their particular camera to the point where they can operate it blindfolded in the dark and not miss a beat, these people are all of a sudden going to be completely usurped by the new class of weekend warrior, who know even less about photography than the current crop. This is auto-tune for photographers, and it's about to turn photography into a joke. Moving right along, I'd like to talk a little bit about the topic of the weekend warrior. Now, full disclosure, it's not without at least a hint of irony that I bring up this topic, which I'll get to in a moment. And I also understand, in the interest of full disclosure, that this is a topic that's been somewhat done. If you go to photography boards, if you go to message boards, this is not a new topic of discussion among photographers. This is something that photographers tend to piss and moan about a whole hell of a lot. And oddly enough, many of the ones that piss and moan about it are weekend warriors themselves, and they just refuse to admit it. So what is the weekend warrior? Well, that definition is going to depend on your perspective. If you're a full-time working photographer, then the weekend warrior is anybody who basically doesn't use photography-based services as the primary source of their income, either by shooting photos, editing photos, retouching photos, restoring photos, etc. That's a very broad overview. Someone who does not derive their primary source of income from photography. I count myself in that. I'm in that. I'm definitely in that category. But I understand that for many, because I'm not a full-time pro, that I am a weekend warrior. Okay, I get it. That's all right. Now, if you want to narrow the definition a little bit more, it would be Someone who, while also not being a full-time photographer and not getting most of their income through photography, also is really all about the money. They see photography as a means to generate quick revenue. The weekend warrior is not necessarily concerned with artistic merit, not necessarily concerned with the growth of their craft or producing interesting or even acceptable images. They're there to turn their camera into a quick buck. They have gone to Best Buy or any other big box store that sells digital SLRs. They've dropped $600 on a camera that's on sale. They've picked up a copy of some editing program, be it Photoshop, be it Lightroom, be it another type of photo editing, or oftentimes they'll use the photo editing software that comes with the camera. And they're cranking out mini sessions of dubious quality at an incredibly low cost. That's more where my definition falls. I'm fine with photographers who are not full-time pros. It's hard to be a full-time pro and feed a family with nothing more than your camera and your editing skills. So I'm okay with people who are not doing this and not being called weekend warriors. I can understand it if photographers do have to take on part-time day jobs or jobs in other aspects. A lot of them work in camera stores. At least a lot of the more frustrated ones do anyway. But moving right along. So what you get are people who go out, buy low-end cameras, don't really care about their skill sets. They just see, okay, well, if I spend $600 and I do X number of sessions of people's photos, I can make back the money for this camera in a couple of months. And by the end of the year, I've made a profit. And because they're thinking purely in terms of profitability and dollar signs, they go out and call themselves professional photographers, regardless of their skill set. And this does somewhat devalue photography. Photography as a skill. Well, I'm at my coffee shop. I'm going to have a little pause now. When we come back, I'll finish up on the Weekend Warrior, and we'll get into the rest of the program. Consider this a brief intermission. Welcome back. So in part 2 of this episode, I'd like to finish off on the topic of the Weekend Warrior, but I'd like to look at it from a different perspective. As I said at the top of the segment, by many, many indicators, I myself can be considered by many, many photographers to be a weekend warrior. So I guess I should present an argument in my defense. I mean, I should have a reason to exist in terms of the world of photography. And I can think of one very, very, well, I'll say it's a good reason off the top of my head. That has to do with perspective. And I don't mean in terms of compositional perspective, like what perspective do I take when shooting an image? But I mean how I approach photography. You see, what happens with a lot of working professionals that I've noticed is that while they can take some very beautiful photos in the right circumstance, in the right situation, I noticed that many have a very restricted comfort zone. Not all. I don't want to be painting with a very large brush here. Well, at least not any larger than I really need to. But I have noticed in looking through photography forums, on photography boards, websites, and groups on Facebook and Twitter and flicker, etc., etc. That once photographers get into the pro zone, the room for growth seems to diminish somewhat. It seems to be that a professional, full-time, mind you, a full-time professional will find what works for them, and they will stick to it with almost the same type of fanaticism of religious extremists. Now, granted, they're probably not blowing anybody up, I'm aware of anyway, but they will put themselves into a very small box of what it is that they do. And it's not very often that they will step outside the box. And this, there's a difference between developing your style and getting into a groove and digging yourself into a rut. And I think a lot of full-time professional photographers, if I look at their portfolios, if I look at the samples that they put forth of recent shoots versus things that they've done in the past, a lot of them tread that line, and they're leaning over the rut a lot. That's not to say the images are bad. It's just that if you just keep cranking out the same type of image over and over and over again, well, it does get kind of boring. It gets dull. It loses its interest. It loses its luster. Now, for many people who are hiring a professional photographer, this might be exactly what they're looking for. They want that style. But showing that you're able to change and adapt and grow a little and evolve, that's something that I don't see a lot. And maybe it's just me. Maybe this is my perspective. Maybe my perspective is tainted by who I've seen. And there are a great deal, a great many photographers. Wow, that sounded horrible. Let me try and rephrase that in a way that makes me sound like I'm not a drooling idiot. Maybe there are a great number of photographers out there who can pull the kind of tricks out of their hat that someone like Gregory Heisler does, where he can shoot anything at any time, anywhere, under any circumstance, and get an absolutely phenomenal photo. And if you've never seen Gregory Heisler's photos, well, you have. You just probably didn't know it. He's shot covers for Time magazine. He's shot for everything. And his photos are always stunning. This is someone who is always learning, always changing, always evolving, always adapting, always experimenting with new techniques, lighting, everything you can think of. This guy's amazing. But I don't see that from a lot of the working pro photographers. They tend to find something that works for them, and they stick to it like shit on a blanket on a hot summer day. And that's one of those things that weekend warriors don't really do a whole lot of. Weekend warriors tend to be more experimental. They tend to find something they like, and they'll stick with it for a while, but they're always looking to see if there's something better, something more interesting, something more out there, a way to make a name for themselves, to stand out from the pack. And that's the type of infusion of, sort of new, and now granted, I use new in a somewhat ironic sense. There's really nothing new you can do with a photograph at this point. Photography has, there's only so far that you can take lighting. There's only so far that you can take composition, composition, development, etc., without losing what it is that makes it a photograph, and then moving into things like mixed media or digital, digital graphic art. But in terms of photography, the weekend warrior is going to go out there and try something new. They're probably going to fail. I know I do. I fail a lot. I will often, do a test shoot with a model, go out, take some photos, take some photos I think would work one way, and do a complete 180 on them. Take something and just rearrange it and see what happens. And sometimes it works, and sometimes the person I'm shooting with will look at it and wonder if I might just be insane or mentally infirm. But there's more risk that I see coming from the weekend warrior. There's more of that, let's go out and find something else. Let's round out the skill set. Let's flesh things out. Let's take things to an extreme. And again, it doesn't always work. A lot of the times it falls flat on its face. But at least there's an effort. At least there's that, almost like a pioneer spirit. Granted, everything's been discovered, but it's a discovery for them. So I think on the whole, the weekend warrior is not an altogether bad place to be. It's not a complete evil. This isn't a black or white topic where you can say, well, no, all the weekend warriors have to go away. They're completely devaluing photography because they're undercutting the working pro. Because sometimes that working pro that's getting undercut is being undercut and overlooked, not because of their pricing necessarily, but because of what they bring to the finished product. And you can think about this in terms of, say, automobiles. Yeah, you can make a really nice, reliable, safe, boxy family car. Something, it's completely utilitarian. But if someone comes along with a sexy two-door roadster that's got a little more pep in the engine, got a little more flash in the paint job, a little more style in the design, and costs a bit less, you know what? People are going to take them for a test drive. And it's not the fault of the other car that offers a little more sex appeal that you're not selling your boxy family sedan that has all the safety features. Something to think about. Not that I'm advocating against the working pro. I know they work hard. Especially wedding photographers. Shooting weddings as sporadically as I do. I can't say that I'm necessarily a wedding photographer, but there is a ton of work that goes into that, and I tip my cap to each and every one of you. I have to say I respect each and every one of you in ways that cannot be measured. So I'll end it here on that food for thought. The next thing I want to talk about, and I just listed off like that because, again, I don't really do segues or transitional material. I'm not good at it. So I'm just going to, smash through it Sutcliffe style. It's hard to say that this is a positive because I know I've been reasonably negative for much of this episode. And I wanted to finish on a positive before getting into sort of the miscellaneous stuff of the closing of the episode. Talking a little bit more about the Indiegogo campaign and whatnot. And I was looking for something that I could bring forward that was a positive. Something that I could say I'm in favor of. And oddly enough, the biggest thing that I could find is something I already wrote about, which is constructive criticism. which kind of makes me sound again like I'm the champion of the negative. You can take that as a photographic pun if you want. I don't even know if it was intended. But thinking back over the whole Nitro thing and the Weekend Warrior thing, one of the things I can't help but think, especially when it comes to the Weekend Warrior, is that, well, we don't really shut this stuff down when we could. You know, when someone comes out and is a complete hack and a complete fraud and puts out images that are of absolute substandard quality and have absolutely no merit whatsoever, you know, we all have the ability to take a look at one of these photos that's posted and honestly assess the quality of the photo. Now, I say honestly, I don't mean maliciously, but a bad photo is a bad photo. And I think people need to hear more of this. Because if you look online and you look at all these photo shares that are the catalyst for the new paradigm for Nitro, and the fuel that feeds the Weekend Warrior, all they get are praise. I don't see very much constructive criticism offered for images anymore, or really even at all. I can count on my hand probably a good, well, actually I can't even count them on one hand, there's too many of them. I can count at least a half a dozen people that show up regularly in my newsfeed because they're on my friends list. I won't name and shame. They probably will figure out who they are if they listen to this episode. But they will post a brand new profile picture, a brand new picture updating what they're doing, where they are, who they're with, and of course what they're eating. And of course it will be taken shaky cam style with glowing eyeballs, and half their face will be cut off, the flash will be lighting up something in the corner of the frame like a Christmas tree. In short, it's a crappy photo. It's a terrible picture. But all I see for these terrible pictures that are posted is just this gushing praise. Not for the people that are in the photo, but for the photo itself. What a beautiful image. What a great picture of you. Wow. This one's my favorite. This one is my favorite, and I see it almost with every single woman friend of mine on Facebook, at least once, is a really, really bad photo of them will be posted. And I don't mean bad as in unflattering in their pose or how they're dressed. I mean unflattering because the image is blurry, it's shaky, their eyes are glowing like they've been possessed by the devil. And there's always going to be at least one of these. Oh my God, that picture makes you look so beautiful. We need to start separating the subject from the image, so to speak. When people post a photo that isn't good, we need to be specific. You look good, but that photo doesn't do you justice. We need more of that. We need to start letting people know that we need a little more quality. If people want this gushing praise, well, let them earn it. And I know not everyone's cut out to be a photographer. I'm not cut out to be an Olympic gymnast. I know that. They don't allow people of my height, girth, and age to be Olympic gymnasts. I'm okay with that. I've accepted it, and I've moved on with my life. And I understand that not everybody is going to be an amazing photographer. Not everyone is going to be, Zach Arias or Helmut Newton or Ansel Adams. Hopefully no one becomes a Stephen Shore. Seriously, I don't fucking get it. Anyone who can explain it to me, seriously, email me, send me a message on Twitter. I'd be happy to hear your theories on this, because I just don't get it. But getting back on topic, we need to start taking the quality of images more seriously. It would be nice. It would be nice if we could get back to an era where criticism, and constructive criticism especially, was allowed to be used on social media or just in general. Now, for anyone who's read the article that I wrote a while back about criticism, you'll remember the anecdote I put up about a somewhat local photographer who's somewhat well known, and who put up a very much bad photo. I know the grammar's off on that, but I'm moving right along anyway. But put up a very, very bad photo of a young boy that was taken during a family photo session. Now, boy's a good-looking kid, handsome little fella. But instead of focusing on the boy, oh, wow, isn't that boy handsome? It's, what a fantastic image. Well, the image wasn't fantastic. The focus was way off. And when somebody pointed out that while the child was definitely an aesthetically pleasing child, the photo itself could use a little work in the areas of focus and focal point, well, the interwebs tore this guy a proverbial new asshole until the photo had to be taken down so the comments could all be deleted. The photo was then put back up, completely unaltered. So the same badly, the same out of focus image that wasn't done right the first time was put right back up. So that way the negative comment and the subsequent attacks on this person for having the audacity to, bring up a way in which this photo could be improved could all be removed. I'm not really in favor of that. I think we need a little bit more criticism. Not just from our peers. I think we need a little bit more criticism from people in general. Because people who will offer constructive criticism aren't doing it because they're coming from a place of malice. They're doing it because they're coming from a place where they're showing that they care about the craft of photography, the craft of creating a good image, adding value back to the craft. And I think that's something we're lacking. Because, as my friend Hayden from HaydenHewitt.com has said on many occasions, overall, there is a dumbing down of culture. We are creating not a multi-culture type of society, we're not creating a melting pot where everybody can kind of live together in peace and harmony sort of thing. What we're doing is we're dumbing everything down to the lowest common denominator, devaluing everything and declaring everyone a winner. There are no winners and losers anymore. Everything has to be leveled out. Everyone has to be on a level playing field at all times, regardless of situation. Everyone has to be a winner. No one can be made to feel bad about themselves for any time, at any time for any reason. Now, I'm not advocating coming out and telling people, you know what, your image is such a piece of shit, I wouldn't even wipe my ass with it if it were printed. Believe me, I've seen that online too. That's just as damaging as too much praise. But we need to get to a happy medium where people can say, okay, all right, there's aspects of the photo that are okay, aspects of the photo that need work. If you want to take this seriously, okay, let's talk. I think that's badly needed. Because without it, in a vacuum, in the vacuum left by a complete lack of constructive criticism, what you get are all these people putting out really bad photos, getting this overly enthusiastic, gushing praise and encouragement, and people are not getting a realistic idea of their actual level of skill. And this breeds weekend warrior mentality, because it starts with someone going out, grabbing their old trusty point and shoot, and putting out noisy, blurred images, getting gushing praise, and they think, hey, you know what? Everybody loves my photography. Maybe I should take this to the next level. And then they go out and they get their Best Buy special digital SLR, put together their Facebook page that says that they're a professional photographer, put together a portfolio of new images that show absolutely no signs of growth or growth in terms of skill, and the cycle continues. It's just kind of the way it is. And it's not, I really, really, really worry sometimes about the future of photography. I really wonder if it will ever come back from this brink that it's teetering on and be recognized as a proper skill that you have to work at, that people can't just hand to you, hang a medal around your neck and say you're a winner too. Not cut out for everybody, just like I'm not cut out to stand on the podium for, doing gymnastics. So now to get into some actual positive vibes after this longish and drawn-out-ish rant on various topics. It really was a bit of a negative episode. I'm really hoping I got it all out of my system, because I don't want these to be overly negative in terms of the podcast in general. But it's just what was on my mind lately. But to get to some more positive news, I did have a fantastic time this past weekend shooting a wedding for Lisa and Michael. And I will be posting an article outlining my day. Just sort of a day in the life of a wedding photographer. Although, I'll probably change that title. That's just a working title right now. I'm not actually a full-time wedding photographer, and wedding photography is not what I shoot primarily, so I need to work on that title a bit. But the whole idea is to chronicle what I do throughout a day when I'm going to shoot a wedding. Originally, I was going to make that episode 3 of Thoughts from My Car as I was driving to and from the various locations that I would be shooting at throughout the day. Didn't end up working that way, mostly because by the time the end of the day came around, I was somewhat tired and profoundly dehydrated. It was a hot, muggy day, and I just really sweat out a lot. And so, by the time I got to the end of it, I really wasn't sounding very intelligent. Not to say that I sound like Einstein most of the times, but I really, really sounded dumb. But I did use, those recordings as the basis for putting together a written journal of the day. So I have all the details down on the recording. Now I just have to kind of transcribe it a little bit and flesh it out into an article. So that should be up very soon. Of course, we're still on target for the Indiegogo campaign launching on August 1st. And I have started getting some responses back from people regarding what the ultimate goal of this is, and that's putting together a feature-length photography-themed documentary. Now, again, can't go into much more detail just yet, mostly because I'm waiting to hear more back from other people that I'm looking to collaborate with, that I'm looking to have as part of all of this. So once I do have enough to go on and enough commitment, I will most certainly be making a more fleshed out announcement, so that way people have something to hang their hat on. But it's coming. I should know probably by the end of this week. So by the time episode 4 rolls around, if something hasn't already appeared on the website, it soon will. Or you'll hear it through here. And it will definitely be announced on the Facebook fan page when everything is up, running, and ready. So that's pretty much our show for today. I do thank you once again for your patience in sorting through this ongoing podcast experiment. Again, the only known photography-based podcast that is willing to admit that it is recorded inside a moving vehicle and not just sounding that way. I see that as I pull up to work, the rain is stopping, the clouds are thinning out, and I see some sunshine trying to poke through the clouds to the east of me. Somewhat fitting as I wrap up this podcast that's been a lot of downpouring of negativity to see a little peak of sunlight down at the end. I'm sure that it is meaningful on many levels. There's a vast array of symbolism at work here. I'm just happy it stopped raining, to be perfectly honest with you, because it's muggy as shit outside and I really don't want anything else that's jacking up the humidity. I'll be honest with you, I'm a little selfish that way. But until next time, I'm Rob from SGNR Photo, and I thank you for coming along for the ride.